Over a drink, we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Hello and welcome once again to Neil Oliver Live. For the second year in a row, Christmas is in peril as our dear leaders wrap up surprise gifts of more restrictions, more disappointment for all. I'll be talking to my panel about when, how and even if we will ever escape the black hole that is COVID-19. We'll also be talking about how the return of mask wearing, a measure that's been with us off and on for many months, makes life even more of a challenge for those with hearing difficulties. And I'll be spending some precious minutes with another Great Britain, a young man who makes a difference to the lives around him by performing thousands of small acts of kindness. All of that and more besides coming up in the next 2 hours. Stay with me. But now it's the news with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Neil. These are your latest headlines. A man has been shot dead by armed police near to Kensington Palace. Officers had been responding to reports of a man carrying a firearm entering a bank and a bookmaker's. The man was treated by paramedics but died at the scene. The Met Police say the incident is not being treated as terrorism. Experts are warning that tougher COVID restrictions may be needed to prevent tens of thousands of deaths over the next 5 months. Scientists are predicting a large wave of infections in January. The latest figures show there are almost 1,900 confirmed Omicron cases in the UK. It comes as Scotland considers introducing further measures next week. Thousands of people staged a protest in the Austrian capital, Vienna, against COVID restrictions and the country's vaccine mandate. Last month, Austria became the first European nation to introduce compulsory COVID-19 vaccinations. The mandate, which is due to come into effect in February, will apply to all over 14s. Those who don't comply face fines. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 70 people have died in Kentucky, and it's feared that figure will rise. The Kentucky governor has declared a state of emergency, saying 4 tornadoes caused damage in over a dozen counties, one of them tracking more than 200 miles. The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats in an apparent bid to ease tensions. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British waters. It comes after an EU deadline to resolve the post-Brexit row over access rights, passed without agreement. The Foreign Secretary has called for a united front against hostile countries. Liz Truss spoke during a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Liverpool. She also expressed deep concern about the amassing of troops near to the Ukrainian border, warning Russia faces severe consequences if it invades its neighbour.
We need to defend ourselves against the growing threats from hostile actors, and we need to come together strongly to stand up to aggressors who are seeking to limit the bounds of freedom and democracy.
Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin has successfully launched its 3rd space tourism flight.
Man engine start. 2, 1.
6 passengers were on board, including the daughter of astronaut Alan Shepard, who was the first American to fly into space. The new Shepard capsule soared to an altitude of 62 miles above the planet before falling back to Earth. You're right up to date now. Back to Neil Oliver Live.
There's something left unsaid about this virus that has done so much to disrupt our lives and change our world, change for the worse. Unsaid or not, it was hiding in plain sight during all the fuss last week about Christmas parties in Downing Street and other government buildings in 2020. Much has been made, obviously, about the fact those parties were organised and took place at a time when Christmas had been cancelled for plebs like us, loved ones left alone when they might have been with family, businesses closed, all manner of get-togethers long planned and looked forward to, set aside for the apparent good of the nation. While others made do with quiet homes, they, by which I mean our leaders and their aides, danced and drank and partied like it was, well, 2020. But never mind all that stuff about one rule for them, another for us, and do as I say and not as I do. Rather, notice something else as obvious as Rudolph's red nose. The people behind those parties, and with whose knowledge they took place, were not afraid to be together in indoor spaces with people not their families. They were not afraid to be maskless in confined spaces with more than 6 people, or 9 people, or whatever the final number was for the proles. Because apart from anything else that might have been driving the government's determination to keep the little people indoors and alone, separated from others they might have talked to and with whom they might have come to different conclusions about why it was all happening, our leaders and their aides were evidently not afraid of catching COVID. People who are afraid of a disease, and I know with absolute certainty that millions of people here in Britain and around the world have been made and remain terrified of COVID, don't have to be told to do whatever they have to do to limit their chances of catching it. People naturally afraid will go home and stay there without the need of government diktat, far less round-the-clock propaganda shaped by nudge units to ramp up the terror. They will, all by themselves, decide to keep away from places where people might gather, like pubs, shops, restaurants, schools, cinemas, theatres, sports grounds. If they do have to venture out for life's necessities, they'll cover their faces and wash their hands. They'll do all of these things and more instinctively because fear of catching a lethal disease makes thinking people take all possible steps to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. In the case of the sort of disease that is naturally terrifying for people, they don't have to be tested morning, noon and night while feeling perfectly well in order to find out whether or not they have a symptomless version of the lurgy. If you're not scared, you won't do any of these things, not unless you're ordered to by the authorities, of course. As well as wanting no trouble from the police and the like, people obey rules and toe the line for fear of attracting unwanted attention from the wider community. Peer pressure. Almost as much as disease of the body, people fear criticism, bullying by the mob, and the shame that falls upon any person who is seen to do the wrong thing. People who are not scared of a disease, however, people who have learned from those around them that there's nothing to fear, will, if they get the chance, especially at Christmas, get together with friends and colleagues and drink and dance the night away. I say again, the people who gathered for those parties and then laughed the morning after about what they got away with were in positions to know more than anyone else about what the government was saying behind closed doors. For whatever reason, they were evidently not afraid of each other, not afraid of condemnation for the rule breaking, and not afraid of COVID. And let's remember too that all of this fearlessness was there in the world of Christmas 2020, that world before the vaccines, whatever your opinion of them, were even available. I'm not here belittling in any way the fear felt by many people, the fear that is still felt and still driving behaviour and choices. The government has, after all, spent hundreds of millions of pounds using all channels of communication, including the media, to instil and stoke and peddle that fear. There have been thousands of deaths since the virus arrived among us, although on account of the way in which the counting was conducted and massaged for greatest effect, we'll never know how many actually died of COVID and not of something else like cancer or heart failure or crashing a motorbike or whatever, while also testing positive for COVID. Any death for any reason is to be mourned, of course it is, but hundreds of thousands of us die every year. Tens of thousands of the dearly loved especially among our elderly and those already ill or frail or physically weakened and compromised in other ways, die every winter on account of flu and respiratory disease. In 2020, for the first time, we were taught to fear death as never before, but not all death. Since 2020, not all deaths are equal. The death to fear above all others was death by COVID, or indeed with COVID, as I've already said. Ironically, all the other ways of dying, by cancer, heart disease, stroke and all manner of ills, were pushed into a column headed, "Don't worry about that for now." Damage to livelihoods caused by all the fear and all the rules was nothing to fear either, apparently. No cause for alarm either were the consequences of the damage done to a generation of youngsters on account of missing out on everything from education to play to mixing with extended family to enjoying childhood itself. Fear's a powerful thing. Like fire, it is a good servant and a bad master. Fear in response to seeing for ourselves without having to be told or persuaded or nudged or otherwise manipulated that something is dangerous makes us fight or flee depending on our personal wiring. Fear can be a good thing, but only for moments at a time. Constant fear, never-ending fear for month after month is a bad thing. Fear that is kindled and stoked by propaganda and for years on end is no good to anyone. We cannot, any of us, live in fear. So I say again, think about those Christmas parties of 2020 when fear among the general population had been pushed to its greatest height by reports of big numbers, the NHS apparently at breaking point, folk on their doorsteps on Thursday nights waving anxiously at the neighbours. "How are you doing? Are you all right?" while beating pots and pans with spoons and clapping for carers, some of whom have either been sacked already or shortly will be on account of saying no to vaccines. Kids off school for months on end, missing out on everything. Think about all that, driven by fear, stoked by the media and the government, and remember how they partied and drank and danced cheek to cheek and laughed. I read reports last week about a party in the offices of the Sun newspaper, one among many in that trade, I venture to guess, and so deduced that they were without fear too. And while I'm on the subject of the press and the media, how about we get to know as soon as possible which journalists representing which media were at those parties, living up the 1 minute and then the following day sitting down to write more fear-laden copy about how we were all about to kill Granny. And then look at us now, getting on for 2 years into it all now. Another Christmas to be crippled and crumpled by more of the same fear-mongering from on high. Straight-faced, despite their own partying, they've whipped up tighter restrictions. In Scotland, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's pre-Christmas gift to the ailing hospitality industry is her advice to one and all to cancel any plans they might have had for Christmas parties. Advent this year has been not about the coming of Jesus Christ, but the coming of Omicron instead. So far, Omicron has infected many people. As yet, there's no data on hospitalisations in the UK. So far, not one single death has been attributed to it on the planet. Hospitalisations and deaths are currently in decline. Omicron might, if we're allowed to look on the bright side for just a moment, be the soft form of the virus that will likely touch everyone, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and so deliver unto them the priceless gift that is natural immunity that might keep a person proof against COVID for a lifetime. But we're not supposed to talk about that, are we? Not frightening, you see, quite the opposite. But no, let's keep the fires burning instead, the fires of fear. Let's push for a 3rd dose of vaccine in time, and we have no reason to doubt it, for a 4th in the spring and a 5th in the summer. Speaking only for myself, I contracted a mild dose of fear in the spring of 2020. I was a bit worried for a while, waiting to see what would happen to us all. Within a few weeks, I'd got over it, got over the fear. I've been immune to the state-sponsored fear ever since. This year I caught COVID and got over that as well. Now I'm naturally immune, which is what I might have asked Santa for if I'd thought of it. Anyone planning parties and get-togethers with family and friends this year, even members of Her Majesty's government and opposition, that's fine by me, and I hope you enjoy every moment. Because it's Christmas, a time for forgiving, as they do say. My family and I will do as we please, and just like the government types at their parties last year, we are not afraid. Well, we've plenty to get through this evening. With me, as we attempt to put the world to rights this week, Baroness Claire Fox, John Gaunt and Ingrid Tarrant. Ingrid, we haven't spoken together.
No, we have not.
In these couch-based circumstances.
I'm super excited about this.
Me too.
The archaeological bit, actually, really.
Good.
But anyway, I know there's other things to get through.
It's lovely to have you here. Are you frightened of COVID?
Not at all. Not at all, at all, at
Develop that thought for me. Tell me why.
Well, to me, when it first came out and they were saying this, I saw it as flu. Well, it is a flu. It's a variant of flu. So it started off with, I've never had flu as far as I know. I think I once lost my taste and smell, but maybe that was flu. But I've never had the flu jab. That's where I started from. So when they were saying COVID, this is a killer and so on, and you have to have a jab, and I thought, well, this is all very, very new. It's come out of nowhere. Then there was all that thing going on about, sort of, was it deliberately leaked, the bats, and, we mustn't forget Wuhan and stuff. And something about it from the very beginning didn't kind of strike true. Then when it was rolled out under the emergency use, I thought, I don't like this one little bit, because it is still being tried, tested and proven. It still hasn't to this day been proven. You need 5 years at least. So I was completely unhappy about it. And I'm a great believer in let nature take its course. I'm a great believer in natural immunity. I grew up in sort of an age where if my friends had mumps, measles and all those sort of things, the parents
Ingrid, I think
go over.
we've got a problem with your microphone at the moment, so just bear with me while we see to that. John, I'll come to you. I'll come to you while we deal with the technical. Omicron, it's new, and it seems, judging by the evidence so far, to be mild like the cold. Shouldn't we allow for the possibility that infection with Omicron might give people natural immunity?
There's a logic to that argument, but at the moment it's too early to tell, isn't it? Just like it's too early to tell how dangerous it could be. I mean, and you were talking about it a moment ago, it's only been around, I guess, in the public area for about a week, 2 weeks. We have to wait and see, which is why I actually agree with the government in terms of, there's a party going on next door. I agree with the government in terms of a cautious approach at the moment. And I still believe in the vaccine. I believe in the boosters. I think everybody should be getting boosted. Big report today.
Oh, we'll have to fight.
Well, oh, your microphone's back on, is it?
Oh, yeah, I can get Dobby again.
Give me a minute. That it ups it to 70 to 75%. I thought your monologue was good, but I think you were also a bit unfair because, I'm not here to defend Boris Johnson. He's made lots of mistakes during this period. He wasn't at the party, as far as we know, or any of the parties. Downing Street is not a little house like you and I live in. It's like it's like a convention centre. And thirdly, the very people who are at that party, including the crying woman, are the thing that is wrong at the heart of government. Because those people, the SPADs, the special advisors, they infest both Labour and indeed the Conservatives. Straight out of Oxbridge, never had a proper job in their lives, and they're the ones who are writing the policy and organising it. And what happened, and that's why we've got this mad green policy at the moment. It's not Boris's idea.
Oh, John,
it's people,
can I intercept?
It's people like Carrie's friends. It is.
But they're old enough and intelligent enough to say, you're a 23-year-old little pipsqueak, I'm not going to listen to that because I don't agree. Why are they being influenced by these youngsters?
Have you met any of these?
And hold on, John, I mean...
Yeah, wishy-washy.
As the President of the United States used to have on his desk, the buck stops here.
Yeah.
So, it's in number 10 or it's in Downing Street, and if Boris didn't know about that, that's almost more worrying than if he didn't let it go. Claire, where are you on the... I'm troubled most of all, beyond the numbers and all the rest of it, by the fear, by the climate of fear, which, as I said, I think takes an enervating toll on individuals and on society as a whole, and there seems to be no end in sight.
So I myself am concerned about the erosion to confidence that fear has had, the way that people have lost their confidence in living socially of each other and over a period of time. But to untangle a couple of things, I actually think a lot of people had that same insight that you've had, Neil, about they weren't frightened last Christmas, so why were we? Because that's the most striking thing for me. As you say, it's definitely the elephant in the room because it's not being talked about in the public sphere, so I'm really glad you did your monologue on it. But that's the thing that's really shocking. I kind of almost don't care that they were having the parties. I mean, that's neither here nor there. But the truth is that you realise, well, if they weren't frightened, then why was there such fear going on, right? What I think has happened this year, and this is something to be very grateful for, is I don't think people are as frightened now. I think that what is very different actually in the UK than a lot of places around Europe and the rest of the world is we did have a period of relative normality where everybody came together. And during that time, you know, you kind of go to the pub, you go to the cafe, you go out for a meal, you find out that, oh, did you hear that Mrs. Smith died of cancer, you know, like when she could have got treated, or they hear about the consequences of so-and-so's kids who would just behave playing up. And so, and they would go through all these things, and suddenly it becomes a thing where the world didn't just get talked about through the eyes of COVID because people started to realise what the collateral damage has been of this period.
So much worse.
I actually do not believe so much in nature knows best. So I'm perfectly happy with some great medical interventions that have happened, whether it's the vaccine, but also a whole range of ways that we've been able to, as humanity, solve a virus. No, but I'm just saying. But I think that's the other thing that's happened is that the sense of proportion is. Last Christmas, as you rightly pointed out, there wasn't a vaccine. This year, people actually think, well, we're all vaccinated.
And last year, people were dying and we were treating them in the wrong way. That's what's different.
I'm very sensitive to the fact that, and many people are, that natural immunity is almost two dirty words.
Yeah.
We're almost not allowed to talk about that. And yet, you know, as a species, we've survived for, 300,000 years via natural immunity. So why are we so wary about talking about the fact that if you've had the disease, you've got natural immunity?
Yeah, I don't know. I think this brainwashing, as they're talking about, has got to people, and they're just thinking the vaccine is the miracle, it's the magic. If you have the vaccine, you will be saved from anything that could possibly happen. So therefore, anybody that's not, you are putting your own life at risk. It's kind of like almost suicide. It's absolute rubbish. That is not true. There's nothing better than natural immunity. I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. I've had the polio, the mumps, all the sort of like bits and pieces that we have.
Have you had COVID?
No, I haven't.
Why not?
I don't know why not.
That's
and I live a normal life.
Irresponsible.
It's not.
That's irresponsible. You can still believe in natural immunity, like he's now got that, he thinks, but he doesn't know how long for, which is a fact, because they don't know how long it lasts.
No, but it's
surely,
still
Ingrid,
there.
It's incumbent on all of us to have the vaccines. That's about living in a society.
John, will you take,
I'm amazed you don't have it.
vaccinations? John, will you take unlimited vaccinations? If there's now 3,
it's a ridiculous argument. It's a ridiculous argument. I've had the 2 jabs and I've had the booster, and now people are saying, "Oh, would you have another one in 6 months?" Well, if it was deemed necessary, yes. What I think, don't worry about me. We should be worried about the 5 million who haven't had it. And frankly, I'm sick to the back teeth of them infesting Twitter with their nonsense and their fake news. And let me finish, I'll let you have your say. And what I feel is it's time we stood up and said, yeah, there will be a 2-tier society because you're not willing to do what all the rest of us have done. And I agree with what Andrew Neil said in the Mail yesterday.
Oh, I know.
Bring it on. And if that's coercion,
I would say
tough.
My reply before we go to the break would be that I'm sure the vast majority of the 5 million, if that's an accurate figure, have already had their brush, severely or not, with COVID and have probably got natural immunity. But moving on this show, we'll love to hear what you think. You can email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk, and you can tweet us as well at gbnews. And I'll do my best to read out some of your comments a little later in the show. Now, obviously, this is the topic of the week, and we will be continuing in a few minutes. First, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy, but for many it will be on the mild side. Let's now take a look at the details. Southwest England will start rather dull and cloudy, however a few sunny breaks will begin to develop. It'll be a very mild start with temperatures in double figures. Moving further east, and there will be some rain around first thing, but it'll become drier as the morning progresses. Wales and the Midlands will also get off to a cloudy and damp start with some hill fog in places, but skies will brighten in a few spots. Northwest England will see a band of wet weather move northwards during the morning, and the heaviest rain likely across the Pennines. A milder start than of late, though with temperatures in high single figures. Further east, and we may see some brightness first thing, but the cloud and rain further south will spread in throughout the morning. The rain will be very patchy, especially towards the east coast. It'll be a fairly chilly start with perhaps a patchy frost across Scotland, but we will see a mix of sunshine and showers, although southern areas will turn increasingly cloudy. Northern Ireland will also start off fairly bright and chilly, but cloud and rain will spread north throughout the morning, with winds also beginning to increase here. Towards lunchtime, southern areas will see brighter spells develop, but remaining damp elsewhere, feeling mild for many, but winds increasing in the west. And that is how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Obviously, let's pick up where we left off before the break with my panel, Ingrid Tarrant, John Gaunt and Baroness Claire Fox. Claire, if I can come to you first. Call me cynical, but it strikes me as the perfect business model for Big Pharma. If you come up with a medical product and governments around the world eventually make it illegal for anyone not to take it.
Well, they're certainly going to make a fortune out of it. I'm quite enthusiastic about pharmacological interventions in general, but I agree that I agree that what one needs to do is to say, at some point, we need to have some evidence that this is what we really need. And I think, people will put up with a booster, but I actually disagree with you, John. I think if it keeps being 6 months, people start going, what? And I know lots of people who are very pro-vaccine, who are a bit hesitant on the booster and saying, I'm definitely having no more. And of course, you've got to think it gets ever younger. But I wanted to also just quickly comment on the fact that I think what's changed now is that people aren't frightened in quite the same way. And that's very important from the point of view of your monologue, because people will now follow the rules, because broadly speaking, British people just do that sort of thing, but they're not putting their masks on because they're scared of each other in the same way. They're much more sort of God, we've got to go through this again. And I think that
but they are putting them on, Claire.
No, I didn't say they weren't. That's why I said they're putting them on, but it's a different kind of atmosphere than last Christmas when people were genuinely frightened. Now people are going through it. And that's important because when you see the fact that there's a big rebellion by MPs, for example, when I've talked to them around Westminster, they're saying they're back now with their constituents, which they weren't last year, and they're basically being inundated with people saying this is a disproportionate reaction. It's too precautionary principle when the evidence isn't in. If you're going to constantly say, well, we don't know, no one's hospitalised, no one's died, but we'll do it anyway, they are not convinced, and they have been, let's be honest, the most risk-averse, them MPs, but they now realise that the public have had a turn, all to the good. I hope that that confidence that we've got back won't be allowed to turn into that gut-wrenching fear where people are just frightened of each other and living life.
Where are you on that, John? I mean, do you still exist in a state of being afraid of
I'm not afraid of
COVID
anything.
and the other people?
Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not afraid.
I'm just asking
I'm
the
not
question.
fearful of COVID, but I think it's sensible to wear a mask. I think it's still sensible to social distance and wash hands and do all those things. And when I said I'd have another one, if in 6 months' time the situation was still the same, I would. I'm as against Big Pharma as many people. But you have to be practical. And although I take on board what Claire's saying, my experience out further north, in Coventry and Warwickshire, with my mates who work at places like the Jag and Land Rover, is that they want this over and done with. And the way they think you get it over and done with is everybody gets a vaccine, therefore the transmissibility, I know you can still transmit it if you've had it, but logically should go down. That's what they're buying into. And this idea, I see the publican guy who's always on the telly, Alan, he's got no chance of that do not comply campaign working because the majority of the proletariat, shall we call them, aren't going to back it. They want to get back to work, get into pubs, have a life, go on holiday. That's what they want to do.
John, with risk of
that's what's going to happen.
Speaking on behalf,
that's not about fear.
With risk of who's speaking on behalf of the proles, I actually think that that's actually not true. Some of it's true, but I actually think it's much more mixed because I would have agreed. Yeah, I would have agreed with you, but actually I'm much more familiar with the North as well as anyone else, and that's what I'm saying has changed. They were being completely conservative this time last year. A lot of people do want to get back to normal, but they now think that political decisions are stopping them getting back to normal rather than the virus is stopping them getting
what's stopping
back to
is
normal.
the people who are refusing to get vaccinated to push this on. Although we must be right, in the last week, over 1 million came forward for the booster. And that is why coercion is important. That is why saying the way it's going, we're going to create a two-tier society. You won't be going to a nightclub.
But John, I just feel like
bring it on.
You want to rehearse this argument that you've had many times, and I know that I have it many times as well on a different side to you. I do happen to think civil liberties still do matter. But regardless of that, all I'm saying is I think that people don't think it's necessary. And that's a very different thing. I think that people have lost faith in the political immediate fear factor where they think, oh God, if we don't all get vaccine, we're all going to die. We're going to kill.
Don't take that to mean that
buying into you're saying all the people, the Jaguar people, they were buying into it. Do you know they have bought into it? They've been selling this. This message is out there. The billions that they spent on advertising it. It has brainwashed people.
I don't think it has. That's patronising.
I don't think it's brainwashed people.
I think it has. A fear factor does that. If you keep pressing it all the way home, it becomes normal. To begin with, it's scared. Then you start to think, oh, we've got to do this. Now I'm not quite so scared because of the way that it's so insidious, the way that it kind of creeps into our psyche. I really do believe that. I see it. I speak to friends who I've had a really good relationship with, and even my own family. And I have this conversation with it, and they have bought into it. And I'm going, just question it, be a little bit objective, look at it, look at the bigger picture, see how this fits into life in terms of all the diseases and flus and Spanish flu, if you like, in the past. What's so different about that? They haven't even got an answer for the common cold. And suddenly all this COVID, and now this Omicron thing, and I think nobody's died in the whole world.
It's only been a couple of weeks, Ingrid.
It's been
and that's
2
why
weeks.
I would caution
yes, exactly. And they're
on
getting
either side of the argument,
hysterical about it already.
I would caution and say, no, we have to wait and see. But I think the majority of people are in favour of the COVID passports. Let's get on with it. If that means
No, I think you're wrong. How can you say that?
I think I am.
Hold on,
and
John.
if you look at any poll, it approves my point.
Well, I've looked at polls.
It's a question for you. I mean, I should say, for the sake of...
fallout.
For the sake of...
No, let's not fall out. We won't fall out. We'll agree to differ.
For the sake of the argument, I think we should say that I think the official line at the moment is that we don't know if anyone has died of Omicron.
Yes,
there are no confirmed deaths.
Oh, it would be banner headlines if there was, though.
Let's just leave that in the pile marked uncertain at the moment. But, John, your obvious antipathy towards that 5 million group, would that manifest itself in the longer term in support for mandating?
No, because,
do you draw the line there?
I'll tell you where the line is, and I think this is kind of getting into hypothetical questions. Fundamentally, there should not even be a need for this discussion. I'm amazed that over 5 million people have not got the vaccine. I want us to address that. If that's certain ethnic groups who need more help, let's put the money in and the support. If it's other people who are perhaps just not doing that, have sheer blooming mindedness. If you look at my Twitter feed, there's stuff they come out with. Today I've been called a Stalin, Hitler, a fascist, and it's just nonsense.
If you don't...
And foul abuse.
John,
let me finish. You asked me a question, and so my thing is I'm more depressed and disappointed that people won't take this vaccine, which, as Claire said, our science has been fantastic. Get it in your arm.
I am more surprised, or as surprised, if... I don't really... I try to avoid numbers because I don't put much faith in them. But let's say 5 million for the sake of argument. I'm actually surprised that only 5 million people have been hesitant in the face of an as yet experimental, unlicensed medical product for which there is no long-term data. And the fact that within 2 years they're even talking about making it compulsory to take such an experimental, unlicensed medical product. I'm surprised if it's only 5... In fact, I don't believe it's only 5 million.
So I think we have to untangle different things. Yeah. I think that actually at the beginning, one of the things that disconcerted me, John, because I'm sort of half with you and definitely not on the civil liberties stuff.
That's right.
Is that all of the briefings that we were getting from the House of Lords by the JTBI and everything was talking about whether it was ethical to give it to under 50-year-olds. Now, all I'm saying is they
15, did you say?
50. What I'm saying is I've been at all these briefings where we were kind of having these... where the doctors in front of us were having these kind of dilemmas, and it's the speed with which it's kind of been rolled out. But I wanted to just say something to you about hesitancy, it being quite complicated. Because, you know, I know somebody who had 1 dose, right, got very poorly, wasn't then able to look after their family, right, during that time, or carry on working and deal with a child. So... You know, is she an unvaccinated idiot? Or, you know, like... Right,
I didn't use the word idiot.
I didn't say you did.
I agree, there's a variety of reasons.
No, but you and I also were just talking that outside, because I wanted to back you up on one thing is, you and I were talking outside about how Twitter's not real life.
Yeah, it's not.
And if I were to believe that all of the people who were very loud, vociferous, and unpleasant, I have to say, quite a lot of people in relation to a kind of hardcore anti-vax thing.
Yeah.
But that is not typical of the 5 million people, or however many, who are hesitant. And I think the most important thing in a modern democratic free society is that medical interventions of all sorts have to be voluntary. I mean, I happen to believe in...
But we're not really. We are going more and more automatic because they are coercing, they are forcing.
But this is what I'm saying.
We've got penalties.
But I agree. We're agreeing on that. What I'm saying is that we've got to be very careful about what is going to be the outcome of a society that dispenses with voluntary medical intervention. That is a dangerous place to go, John.
But you heard what I said, though, didn't you?
We've got to get to the break. First, can I just be... I'm so grateful that I'm sitting here in amongst what is a very measured conversation about such a hot topic. So I'm very pleased with the restraint being shown by all.
We come back for the next hour.
After the break, we will be bringing you news, and this fascinates me beyond words. News of the first evidence of a Roman crucifixion in the UK.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Change of pace now, change of atmosphere and topic. Crucifixion is a word laden with meaning and symbolism, and it brings to mind the thought of terrible suffering, amongst much else. Now archaeologists have found the first ever evidence of this cruel punishment in a quaint historic village in Cambridgeshire. Working in advance of a new housing development, archaeologists found the grave of a man who died during the time of the Roman occupation of these isles. Hammered through one of his heels was an iron nail. Such finds are incredibly rare. Joining me now to discuss the significance of the discovery is archaeologist David Ingham from Albion Archaeology. Hello there, David.
Hello, Neil. Good evening.
This is just extraordinary. I don't think I ever expected to hear of such a discovery at all. Tell me, if you would, just exactly what was found. Give us a sense of the circumstances and the nature of the find.
Well, as you probably know, most of the archaeology in this country nowadays is done under the planning system that a developer wants to build a new housing estate or something like that. So they're obliged to get archaeologists in first to have a look at whether there's any archaeology there. So we went out to this village, Kensington in Cambridgeshire. We'd had a quick look earlier. We knew there was some good Roman archaeology there. So we knew it was going to be a good excavation. You quite often find burials on Roman settlements, but we had quite a few on this one, 48 in total. And you just never expect to find something like this. It's so incredibly rare. It's only the second time anywhere in the world that a skeleton has been found with a nail still in place through the foot, that we didn't even recognise what we'd got when we were excavating the grave that you can see there. It wasn't until 2 days later, when the bones had been taken back to the lab and someone was cleaning them up, washing all the mud off, that suddenly they spotted there was a nail there. It was only a very short nail, which is why it wasn't spotted. You can see there it was protruding 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres at most on either side of the bone, covered in mud. And it was just a question of what on earth have we got here when it was found. We started looking on Google. I mean, crucifixion is so ingrained in the public consciousness through history and Christianity in particular that I personally just assumed there must have been lots of examples of it found before. And we were looking through on Google, and well, there's one from Israel in 1968, and there isn't anything else. What's going on here? And it was only then that we started realising how extremely rare this was. And we dug the site in 2017. That's most of the reason why it's taken this long to get the evidence out that we've been trying to go through and satisfy ourselves that we're not just missing some other explanation, how it might be accidental or deliberate in some other manner, but we just can't come up with any other plausible explanation, which means it must be crucifixion.
Because of the image that we all have in our heads of a crucifixion, was there no evidence of a similar wound to the other foot or to either of the hands or forearms?
Well, the thing is that the image we have of crucifixion through Christianity, that's very much atypical. Nails through the body, generally speaking, wouldn't have borne the weight of the individual. So it was far more common for people just to be tied to a cross. The nail, as in this case, wasn't about bearing the person's weight. It was just to make them fixed on the cross, stop them wriggling around, trying to put themselves in a slightly less uncomfortable position. So there were so many different ways that people could be crucified, but in this case, they just seem to have nailed one foot to the cross to stop him wriggling around, and the rest of the body would have been tied. We did have a look at the arms to see whether you could tell any signs on the bones of ligatures there, but no evidence for that. But then the skeleton didn't survive in perfect condition by any means, so it's possible that some detail has been lost. But generally speaking, you wouldn't necessarily see that detail from ropes binding the body anyway.
I mean, as you say, the word, it's so laden with meaning and imagery. What was the atmosphere like in the lab or whatever when the penny dropped and it was realised, my goodness, what we're dealing with is...
Exactly. I wasn't there myself. I just got a phone call. I was working at home, I think, at the time. This is long before COVID, but it was from a few people in the office. And in archaeology, it's pretty much like any profession. Once you do it full-time, day in, day out, year in, year out, a lot of it's pretty tedious routine. But there was a palpable selection that even from battle-hardened, weary, cynical archaeologists who'd been doing it for 30 years, there were still people going around the office excitedly looking things up on Google, thinking, this is just so bizarre to have found this. Surreal, really, the discovery.
What's amongst many things, it's amazing to me that, Britannia was pretty much out on the edge of the empire, and that something, such a specific punishment had also been carried as far into the outer reaches of the empire that you would find it there. I would have imagined that maybe crucifixion would have maybe stayed on mainland Europe and closer to the centre of things. No.
Well, it does show that Roman Britain was still very much part of the empire, that Roman rule extended this far. And what's more is, we don't know exactly when the person was crucified. We had the skeleton radiocarbon dated, but it's unfortunately not very precise, the dating for the Roman period, just because of how the scientific techniques are at the moment. But he was crucified somewhere in the 3rd or the early 4th century AD. So this is not only a crucifixion out in the far-flung western provinces of the empire, it's after crucifixion as a practice had mostly been abandoned, because all free men in the empire were regarded as citizens after an edict by the emperor in 212 AD. So it was already frowned upon before then as a particularly cruel method of punishment reserved for the most serious criminals, usually people who'd done something serious against the state, rabble-rousing, sedition, that sort of thing. So not only having it in such a remote province, but at such a late date as well, it shows that it was still being carried out and that people were physically being nailed to the cross rather than just tied.
Is there a sense, is there any way of knowing, in terms of the way crucifixion was normally carried out, would it have been a cross of wood, or would it have been, is that the part of the traditional means of crucifying? Would it have been on a cross?
Pretty much so. I think there are some indications that sometimes it might just have been on a single upright pole. But generally, the method of death wasn't so much through the injuries, it was through asphyxiation, because the arms were spread out. So you can't breathe properly in that position. Your whole weight is dragging you down. It's crushing your lungs effectively. So it's a particularly barbarous form of execution, because it can take a day, 2 days even, for someone who's fit and strong and healthy to die that way. So you're very much hung up on a cross, body exposed to the elements in full public view, taking a day or two to die, as a particularly effective deterrent to others, you'd imagine.
David, I could talk with you and speculate about every aspect of this discovery for the rest of the show, but as is always the case, I've got to move on. But thank you 1,000 times for bringing this extraordinary story to us, and it's one I'd like to maybe keep up with you and see, what will be further developments, further understanding. But David, for now, many thanks. After the break, we will meet the teenager who has raised £40,000. I say that again, £40,000 for charity by doing 2,000 random acts of kindness. But first, here is the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather damp and cloudy as rain continues to spread eastwards across the UK. The southwest will remain rather cloudy and damp too, with some mist and fog developing across the hills. It'll be feeling mild though, with temperatures remaining in double figures. Moving east, it will be a wet evening across southeast England and East Anglia, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle moving eastwards. After a brief drier interlude, the rain will return across Wales and will turn heavy at times across higher ground, mild with temperatures staying in double figures. Moving on to the Midlands and northwest England, there you will also have a cloudy and damp evening with the heaviest rain across the Pennines. After a cold afternoon, temperatures will be on the rise as the mild air moves in. Northeast England will start the evening on a cold and cloudy note with some patchy rain in places. Temperatures, however, will begin to climb, reaching high single figures throughout the evening. Moving up to Scotland, and it'll be rather cloudy and damp in the south. However, further north, we'll see a mix of clear spells and showers, but feeling chilly here. Northern Ireland will become drier this evening as some clearer skies move in, especially out towards the west of the country. It'll be mild initially, but turning cooler later on. And overnight, it'll remain cloudy and damp for many, but increasingly mild, with the exception of northwestern parts of the country.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks for staying with me. Now, stay safe, be kind and leave no one behind. That's the personal philosophy of this week's Great Britain. Regular viewers will know that each week we try and pay attention to those individuals who try and make the world a better place. Most have faced and overcome difficulties of all sorts, the sort that might keep others down, and yet, on account of strength of character, they find it in themselves to be inspired to rise up and to carry others with them. This week I'm joined by Sebbie Hall and his mum Ashley. Sebbie has raised more than £40,000 by performing all manner of simple acts of kindness. Hello both, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
And hello Sebbie.
Hi.
Now this is a break from the world at large for me. I so enjoy hearing these stories. Now the notes say that you have some difficulties with learning and some physical tasks. But I don't really get the impression, having looked into all that you've done, that you've been held back in any way. So let me hear a bit about Sebbie. Let me hear about what a bit about what situation you've come from and what it is that inspires.
What's inspired you to raise all that money, Sebastian? Why did you want to do it? To make people feel
happy inside.
Happy inside. So, yes, thank you, Neil. This is Seb, and how old are you, Sebsy?
18.
18. And when you started your acts of kindness, how old were you then?
17.
17. And Seb's got a chromosome anomaly, which Seb doesn't mind me sharing with you. So it makes communication sometimes quite hard. So we're helping Sebbie do his communication and talking, aren't we? But Sebbie will try and add some things, won't you?
Yeah.
So when Sebbie was born, the prognosis was that Sebbie might never walk or talk, and Sebbie has done more than that. And as you've alluded to, this year, for the last 18 months, he's raised nearly
£40,000.
And how have you raised your money, Sebbie? By doing
Random acts of kindness.
Random acts of kindness to
strangers.
To strangers. So when lockdown first happened, Sebbie wanted to speak to a friend on a Zoom call because you thought he might be
lonely.
But did he have a laptop or a computer to be able to speak to you, Sebs?
No.
No. So Sebastian wanted to give him his, but we explained that you can't just go giving people your things, and we talked about charity. Sebbie said he'd like to raise some money to help people that are lonely. So we talked about what sort of things people do for charities, like climbing
mountains.
Or maybe jumping out of aeroplanes. But Sebbie didn't want to do any of that, did you?
No.
What did you say you could do? You could be?
Kind.
So Seb said he could be kind. So he started off to raise, how much did you want to raise, Seb? What?
£1,000
by doing
100 acts of kindness.
In how long?
10 days.
So he wanted to do 100 acts of kindness in 10 days, which he did, and raised £1,000. But because it's so lovely to be kind to random strangers, and it makes everybody feel, how did it make them feel? What were they saying to you, Sebbie?
Happy inside.
And were they saying, thank you ever such a lot, that Sebbie then decided he wanted to continue. And since then, since March 2020, Sebbie's done one random act of kindness, if not many, many more per day, has probably done over 2,000 random acts of kindness now, and has raised nearly £40,000 to provide communication devices for young people with disabilities. He's set up disability rugby clubs. He's set up, he's helped provide money for disability cricket. And I think, as you can see on the screen at the moment, he's done all sorts of random acts of kindness. Absolutely.
Sebastian and Ashley, just hearing all of that, Ashley, you said at the top that it's not easy for Sebbie to communicate, but there are so many ways to communicate, and being kind and acts of kindness might be one of the best, if not the best, ways of communicating and showing the world around you who you are and what you stand for. You know, can there be any better way to communicate than to be kind?
I think Sebbie put it in a nutshell one of the days recently. He said it's not about
talking,
it's about being
kind.
Yeah, and I think and that has been the main thing, and it's been absolutely fantastic for Sebbie's confidence, because it's hard for anyone to go and speak to strangers, let alone when you have communication problems. And the whole point of what Sebbie wanted to do is enable people that were in isolation, but also people that can't communicate, to find different ways of communicating. So his money has helped hundreds of families with adapted laptops. So when the government were giving out all the laptops, when all the children were off school, it's no point in giving a child that has maybe problems with their fingers, with cerebral palsy, for example, a laptop if they can't press the buttons. So Sebbie's money was going towards adapted devices, so that everybody could stay in communication, and then after COVID, still be in communication with each other.
Sebastian and Ashley, it's just lovely to hear you. As you say, it matters to some extent what people say, but what people actually do and what they do for others around them says so much more. So many, many thanks for making time for us this evening, and continue to do what you're doing, Sebbie. You're a shining light, like on the tree behind you. So thank you very much both for being with us. Now, there's lots more to come between now and 9 o'clock. We'll be looking at how face masks are causing issues for people who are hard of hearing, and we'll speak to a man who used to run some of the world's most glamorous hotels. But Claire, I think you wanted to expand on that thought about random acts of kindness.
Well, I think that one of the most harrowing aspects of the last 20 months has been isolation and loneliness, and absolute credit to Sebbie for being so active. But the broader point was that if we remember it when the pandemic started, hundreds of thousands of people actually volunteered, didn't they? They signed up with that government volunteering scheme, wanted to help. And I think one of the big mistakes the government made, was it demobilised people. You know, young, fit people were not, they didn't do what Sebbie did, but they wanted to help. They could have been, I don't know, doing the gardens of care homes, painting the outsides of them, all sorts of things that would have been useful. But in fact, they were told that the way that we had to behave was to be a good citizen. You sat at home and did nothing. I think that's been a very damaging lesson. Luckily, somebody like Sebbie showed us it wasn't necessary.
Absolutely. Perfect. So much more we could say about that, as with all the other topics. But right now, it's time for a news update from Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Neil. Here are your latest headlines. A man has been shot dead by armed police near to Kensington Palace. Officers stopped a vehicle after responding to reports of a man carrying a firearm entering a bank and a bookmaker's. The man was treated by paramedics but died at the scene. The Met Police say the incident is not being treated as terrorism. Experts are warning that tougher COVID restrictions may be needed to prevent tens of thousands of deaths over the next 5 months. Scientists are predicting a large wave of infections in January. The latest figures show there are almost 1,900 confirmed Omicron cases in the UK. It comes as Scotland considers introducing further measures next week. Thousands of people staged a protest in the Austrian capital, Vienna, against COVID restrictions and the country's vaccine mandate. Last month, Austria became the first European nation to introduce compulsory COVID-19 vaccinations. The mandate, which is due to come into effect in February, will apply to all over 14s. Those who don't comply face fines. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 70 people have died in Kentucky, and it's feared that figure will rise. The Kentucky governor has declared a state of emergency, saying 4 tornadoes caused damage in over a dozen counties, one of them tracking more than 200 miles. The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats in an apparent bid to ease tensions. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British waters. It comes after an EU deadline to resolve the post-Brexit row over access rights, passed without agreement. The Foreign Secretary has called for a united front against hostile countries. Liz Truss spoke during a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Liverpool. She also expressed deep concern about the amassing of troops near to the Ukrainian border, warning Russia faces severe consequences if it invades its neighbour.
We need to defend ourselves against the growing threats from hostile actors, and we need to come together strongly to stand up to aggressors who are seeking to limit the bounds of freedom and democracy.
Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin has successfully launched its third space tourism flight.
Man engine start. 2, 1.
6 passengers were on board, including the daughter of astronaut Alan Shepard, who was the first American to fly into space. The new Shepard capsule soared to an altitude of 62 miles above the planet before falling back to Earth. You are right up to date now. Back to Neil Oliver Live.
Welcome back. Now, not that long ago, we brought you the incredible story of veteran Mark Harding, who was left paralysed from the neck down after being shot in Afghanistan in 2010. He's raising money for veterans and their families by taking on a 3-day trek in Cumbria, which kicked off on Friday night. We sent our North West of England reporter, Bradley Harris, to meet him.
This is the face of someone who refuses to be defeated. In 2010, Mark Harding was serving his country, and then this happened. He was shot in the neck by an enemy sniper on patrol in Afghanistan and was told he would never walk again. Since then, Mark has proved medics wrong, taking part in some incredible endurance challenges, raising thousands of pounds for charity.
For me, it's about just helping and giving back in my own little way. That is the plain and simples of it, really. It's about helping other people and giving back.
He's now challenged himself to a 50-mile trek through Cumbria, whilst carrying an Antarctic-style pulk filled with donated gifts and food for Christmas hampers.
We set off on the back roads to Penrith, which was really good. We're all ex-veterans. A lot of the veterans that are on the walk that are from Calderwood House, and they deal with a lot of veterans who've got post-traumatic stress, so it made sense to bring them and get them involved. We've had loads of people honking the horn, you know, I mean, literally some lady just stopped the car and she'd donated like £40, and then literally, I think within a space of 60 minutes, we had £100, so it was absolutely fantastic.
The former soldier has raised over £6,000 to help veterans with their mental health and also put food on the table for vulnerable families this Christmas.
I think it's absolutely fabulous. I mean, to go out there, walk for the wounded when he's been so terribly wounded himself, and being told, you know, he's not going to walk again, and to overcome all of that. I mean, he must be a miracle man.
It's just beyond words. I think he's leading the leaderboard for raising a certain amount of cash for walking with the wounded. And as I always call him, he's our Captain Tom.
He is just really selfless and just an inspirational man, and he puts everybody to shame with all the problems that everybody has. He just gets on with it, and he's just looking for the next venture.
As the veteran ticks off another challenge, one thing is clear: he's not finished yet.
There's possibly an ice marathon that I'm looking at in Antarctica, and a spine race up the centre of the Midlands. So I'm just sort of like in the process of getting them planned.
Bradley Harris, Carlisle, GB News.
Ingrid, if I can come to you, we don't hear enough, I don't think, or we can't hear enough about people like that.
No, we don't. I have to say, I've got to say, sort of Ashley, Sebbie, I love them. I want to hug them. Mark Harding, I want to hug him too. You're quite right. It is so uplifting. Everything's doom and gloom. You only hear about the bad things. This is so inspiring. It's you can do it. If you put your mind to it, that determination, have goals. It's all about saying, have a goal. And even if you don't, it's like shoot for the sort of the stars, but if you reach the moon instead, it doesn't matter. But have goals, because you can. Everybody can.
John, within that, running through that story is the plight of veterans. And we don't do enough for our veterans either, do we?
Well, we certainly don't do enough for our veterans generally. And when people do things like he's doing, it shames us even more, doesn't it? And there's a bloke who sleeps outside a very posh kind of restaurant in Warwick, where I live, and like his bed's there all day, and nobody moves it now. His mattress is on top of cardboard and stuff, and he keeps himself in quite good shape. And you think, why isn't he in a hostel? Or why hasn't he got somewhere to live? Or, is it mental health? What is it? But he still shouldn't be on the streets now. He's been there. Well, my daughter was working at M&S about 5 years ago. He's been there for that long.
How is it, Claire, that we do in our society, in our towns and cities, so often it's veterans of our armed forces that make up the numbers of those who've been left behind by everything else?
Yeah, I mean, there's been actually quite a lot of parliamentary activity on this. People like Johnny Mercer has been trying to get more help for veterans and so on and so forth. But I think one of the difficulties is that, the army is quite a tough place to be and to work and to get out of it. Having been through a lot of traumatic things, people aren't always adept at adapting to that, and society doesn't want it. We want to treat veterans as heroes. We actually want to treat, those veteran heroes who are doing things like that. But practically, there's a problem. You kind of look at the prison population, disproportionate number of veterans in there, disproportionate homeless. It's a more complicated story, and people therefore don't quite know how to intervene. I don't know that I've got any solutions, of course, but I think that there's a real neglect, because we want to say they fought the wars for us, but actually we don't want to deal with the debris of it, which is that a lot of them are messed up, let's be frank about it, and that's not quite the narrative people want to have. It is a complicated story, isn't it, John? I mean, as you say, that chap you're talking about has been there. There's Mark Harding, who's coping with in the aftermath of all that he's gone through in the way that he is. But is it always the case that, they say that, sometimes it's those whom we love most and should know best who elude us. The part we have to give is not wanted. Yeah. And it's very difficult sometimes, isn't it, to know which hand to extend to the person in question.
And some of them don't want it, Neil. And then you have to work out why they don't want it, I guess. But there's something wrong. I mean, I'm not bashing people who are trying to get into our country via Dover, but there is something wrong when they're staying in 4-star hotels in Warwickshire, and weddings have been, and we cannot put up people who have served our country. There's something wrong. I take on board, but Johnny Mercer and that fight he's having, he's not won that, has he? No, I know. He's had terrible trouble to get that through. I remember when I was on The Sun all those years ago, we did this story about their barracks and the state of what our soldiers were living in. I think this was after the first Gulf War, and what they had to come back to. The very same barracks, of course, Napier barracks, that got burnt down by some asylum seekers, refugees, economic migrants, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not trying to put the blame there. I'm not trying to just shove it on them. I'm just saying we need a holistic approach and get this sorted. Because we've talked about it for years.
It's an eternal problem, isn't it? It's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy that. It's thank you, Mr. Atkins, when the band begins to play.
Tommy Atkins.
Down through the centuries, the soldiers are wanted in war, and then in peacetime, they just seem to be left by the side of the road.
Yesterday I was driving through London. There was a man standing by a little island by the traffic lights, and he said, "Ex-army, I'm homeless." I actually wanted to stop and ask him his story, but I couldn't because it was by the lights and the traffic was going forwards. And I am confused about this because I don't think we do entirely neglect them, because there is support out there, but they're just not seeking it, which goes back to why there are some that just don't want that help.
But there's also been quite a big political controversy, which, dare I tiptoe into it, which is that there's an ambivalent attitude, I think, politically about what to do. So you've had the sagas of prosecuting former veterans in relation to Ireland, instead of kind of writing that off as things have moved on. And what I'm saying is, as a society, we don't know how we feel about veterans. That's all I'm saying, is because there's a lot of lip service paid, and yet there's a lot of them that feel as though they're under the cosh. And I'm not even making a comment on whether they should or not be held accountable for things that have happened, but it's at least confusing. But I think that story was very inspiring, but it's also the case that I think we need a full, frank debate about veterans, which is a slightly different thing, which is that we actually open that discussion up, talk about as a society.
Really, because we don't know what they're thinking.
No,
but all I'm quite sensitive.
Yes, well, what I mean is that I think a social discussion about what we need to do about veterans, because there's obviously a problem, and it's just not as black and white as let's just help them, because nobody's trying to not help them, but there's lots of political sensitivities there that I think that people want to avoid.
And do you think some of it's a product of, you know, as the gap between the rich and the poor widens, and we can all see that it's widening. You know, the top 8 shareholders, in Pfizer and Moderna, $10 billion last week. And the abyss, is that abyss, the veterans have been falling into that abyss for a while. Is that abyss going to catch more and more people that we identify with perhaps more readily than veterans?
And we're separating more as a society anyway, and it's not just down to COVID. I think that disparity, that gap between rich and poor is getting greater. I don't know whether we're becoming generally a more selfish society. Maybe we need to be a bit more selfless. I would say that's why people should vaccinate, and people should.
Oh, don't let's get onto that.
No, he's just had his little push.
We'll come back to that.
Just one very quick thing, which was one of the things is definitely getting employment opportunities. And one of the things that was noticeable was in the HGV driver shortage question, they suddenly started saying, oh, maybe we should be getting ex-veterans in. And you think the fact that you're only mentioning it now, I mean, I think that actually that's a big gap when you leave the army, that you're kind of just dumped. Well, and they've got great skills, right? And we've got a skills shortage. So one of the things I'd like to see is a much more thought through policy from the army for their veterans in terms of employment possibilities when they leave the army. That would be helpful for society.
In fact,
as well.
quite a few did actually do that, because of course they've got the HGV, they're tank drivers, they can master
There's also a thing about whenever there's a problem, let's bring the army in. Why don't we have a proper army reserve? You know, so when they leave, they are the people who can come and do this kind of work.
To me, I'm constantly troubled now by a culture of waste. You know, we're told to be green and to be environmentally sensitive and all the rest of it, and yet we live in a situation where it's throwaway. You know, so much is made and used briefly, upgraded, worn out, worn once, thrown away. It's so wasteful, and it's something in our own backyards that, you know, never mind saving the rainforest, sort these things out that we shall be responsible for. And sometimes I think the waste extends to people, that we've got throwaway people, and that there are people in our communities that, in this march forward, you know, to just use things up, we're using people up.
Well, there's an awful lot of people who are going to be left behind, aren't there, as we go more to automated factories and the rest of it. You know, when I was a kid, people would sweep the factory floor. Often people who had Down syndrome, you know, that's where you would see them. You wouldn't see them anywhere else. That doesn't happen anymore, because if you've been in a modern factory now, it's as clean as anything. You know, it's a different world. And as this new industrial revolution comes along, and maybe more people working at home, there are going to be people left behind.
But it's also the case that we do know there's a massive skills gap, right? And in fact, I know you've had him on the show, because I've seen him, which is Tom Buick, who works in this area professionally. And when I talk to him and the people who work in vocational education and so on, this is the kind of thing I want government to do, right? Which is to go, oh, look, there's a shortage of people over here. You know, it doesn't have to. I said HGV drivers and it was a bit glib. But it could well be that a lot of people from the armed forces would be perfect to work in care home situations, right? We've got a care home staff shortage problem. All I'm saying is we need a broader discussion on that skills thing, and then we wouldn't waste people.
We might be able to pick this up again. Now, a little later, in what remains of the hour, we'll meet two people who are hard of hearing, who will tell us about the unique challenges that face masks present and have presented to them. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy for many, but it will be on the mild side. Let's now take a look at the details. Southwest England will start rather dull and cloudy, however, a few sunny breaks will begin to develop. It'll be a very mild start with temperatures in double figures. Moving further east, and there'll be some rain around first thing, but it will become drier as the morning progresses. Wales and the Midlands will also get off to a cloudy and damp start with some hill fog in places, but skies will brighten in a few spots. Northwest England will see a band of wet weather move northwards during the morning, with the heaviest rain likely across the Pennines. Further east, and we may see some brightness first thing, but the cloud and rain further south will spread in throughout the morning. The rain will be very patchy, especially towards the east coast. It'll be a fairly chilly start with perhaps a patchy frost across Scotland. But we will see a mix of sunshine and showers, although southern areas will turn increasingly cloudy. Northern Ireland will also start off fairly bright and chilly, but cloud and rain will spread north throughout the morning, with winds also beginning to increase here. Towards lunchtime, southern areas will see brighter spells develop, but remaining damp elsewhere.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Sempre avanti, ever forward. That's the motto of the Gilardi Family Shield, and it's a philosophy that has directed the lives and careers of 4 generations of hoteliers: Giuseppe, Giulio, Bertie and Geoffrey. Giuseppe started it all, managing hotels in his native Italy in the 19th century. His son Giulio came to London, eventually managing the Savoy and Claridge's. His son Bertie helped create the international Trust House 40 empire. Geoffrey, Bertie's son and the fourth generation Gilardi to make his mark in the luxury hotel business, was managing director of the world-famous Lanesborough in Knightsbridge for almost 3 decades. He's now written a book about his family's love of the hospitality sector, about which we hear so much at the moment, and how he's rubbed shoulders with royalty, celebrities and politicians. And Geoffrey is here with me now. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Did you ever have any choice but to go into the hotel industry?
That's true. Not really. I didn't know what I was going to do after school, and of course the easy way out was to go into the hotel industry. Frankly, I just never left. I started when I was 17 years old, and I worked my way up. And I've loved every minute of it.
Where were those first hotels? You know, where did you cut your teeth, so to speak?
The first ones were in London. It was actually the Carlton Tower, which used to be the Sonesta Tower, there, and the London Hilton. And then I was sent to France, so I worked in a small hotel called the Grand Hôtel Tivolier in Toulouse, where I was supposed to learn French, but of course all the French love to speak English, so didn't learn it well enough. Then I came back to London and went to North America, where I spent 17 years.
Wow.
And I opened the Bel Air Hotel for Caroline Hunt, and she owned it. And that's another great hotel I have under my belt.
Another book there. The Lanesborough, what makes it so special? What holds a person there for across 3 decades? Yeah.
28 years. You know, it was a special hotel. It used to be St George's Hospital. I think most people know that building as St George's Hospital. And it took 4 years to renovate it. And at the time of opening, it was one of the most expensive hotels to build in the world in 1991 at over £1 million a room. Nowadays, that's not very much, but
really?
In those days, it was unheard of. We cut our teeth on that hotel by creating. We were given the opportunity by the hotel owners and the hotel management company, Rosewood at the time, to really do some very innovative things. We were one of the first hotels in the world to have butler service for every room. We had the latest electronics. And once again, today everybody has these things, but you know, we had things like faxes in every room, and we had CD players in every room. In 1991, that was leading edge stuff.
What kind of, I have to ask, what kind of clientele you had? You know, what sort of figures were coming in and out?
Wealthy people. But no, it was nearly all, in the first few years, well, it was about 60% American, and about 30% European, and the rest is sort of mixed.
And were you seeing showbiz celebrities? Were you seeing world leaders? Were you seeing...
So all of them.
Can you drop any names?
I mean, it's all in the book, and not all of them, but many, you know, famous people came in and out. Loved meeting and greeting them. Most of them were absolutely lovely. Had a few incidents with some there.
Who do you remember most fondly? Who were good? Who were good and?
One of my favourites has always been Patrick Swayze. He was such a delight. And then he used to invite me out for a drink with him, and had a lot of time. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also a regular guest at one point, and we enjoyed having him. Who else? Jay-Z, I think, still stays there on occasion. He was everyone's favourite, I think. Very nice man. So many. We had all the royal family there, which was always a delight. And so it was a fascinating time.
Awkward customers, difficult people?
No. Listen, when you pay the kind of money that you had to pay to stay at the Lanesborough, you can be as awkward as you like. They're all opportunities. Most of the guests that I got to know very well and still see from time to time it very often started with a problem. So the whole idea in the hotel business, I've always said, you know, don't call it hospitality, we should call it the happy business, without the pills, of course. And our job is to make people happy. And when people have a complaint, 99% of the time, you can solve it as long as your heart is in the right place.
Amongst many ideas that caught my attention was the idea of a dynasty. You know, it's not so often that you hear of a working tradition being passed down through 4 generations.
Yeah.
There is something valuable in that, isn't there? That continuity.
I certainly think so, but you know, because especially coming from a family that has really made changes in the hotel industry and have been leaders in there, especially my grandfather, who, you know, he worked at the Savoy, he worked at Claridge's, he even opened the Waldorf Astoria in 1931.
Wow.
And where he used to go with my father on the Queen Mary 6 months in New York and back at Claridge's for 6 months, yes.
Amazing.
And, you know, he was a friend of Marconi, and who he met when he first came over here. And it's full of fascinating people and fascinating things that were going on. You know, this book actually doesn't have a lot of what people, I think, originally expected in it, which was little tales about the guests that stayed there. Although there are lots of those, I've chosen to do more of a historical book that talks about the interesting things that go on, and, you know, really to also encourage people to go into the hotel industry, especially at this time, you know, when the hotel industry, I think, is under a great deal of pressure from many events that are going on. And I think this shows what a delight it can be to be in the hotel business and to work in it, and all the wonderful people you meet, although you do have to work quite hard.
Lovely, lovely. It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for coming in and telling me about that. A real insight into a world that I've only seen from one side, and it's always good to hear it from the other side of the reception desk. So thank you very much for coming in. A little earlier, we heard the inspirational story of Sebbie Hall, the 18-year-old who has raised £40,000 for charity by doing 2,000 random acts of kindness. To donate to Sebbie's cause, you can visit the Just Giving website and search for him, Sebbie Hall. I can, as I said before, pay some attention to your messages, the things that you've been sending in via social media and the like. Where are we now? I never know what these are going to be in advance. They're just presented to me. Chris J tweeted, enjoyed the monologue, but I can't watch John Gaunt spout government propaganda. There you go. The Tortoise tweeted, I am so with the Coast guy. That's me. I am that guy. Only the SAS guarding my door will stop me doing as I please. Oh, I wish I had the SAS guarding my door. Hélène de Bagatelle says, it was my initiation with the Coast guy. Why didn't anyone warn me? I'm not quite sure what that even means. Kennedy on Twitter says, Claire Fox is terrific. I think that too, Kennedy on Twitter. I've been massively impressed with her. Excellent stuff. Andy Hayes on Twitter, really enjoying the Neil Oliver debate. Thank you. I am delighted that we were able to handle and get in with some depth and some detail to such a topic that inflames people's passions in the way that it so obviously does. And finally, I'll leave the last word to Michael Blofeld. OMG, Gonti must be on a GB News retainer. I couldn't possibly say. Now, moving on. This recent time of mask wearing has been difficult for many people and for many different reasons. The absence of faces and the countless cues and expressions that faces carry and transmit has for many intensified feelings of being isolated from others. For those who are deaf or hard of hearing to a greater or lesser degree, the covering of mouths has made life harder. Reading lips or just being able to watch mouths and so see as well as hear words is vitally important for many. Added to face coverings have been plastic screens that have also served to muffle sound for those who, one way or another, and for all manner of reasons, have to work harder and pay more attention in order to hear. I'm joined now by Susan Daniels and Holly Parker from the National Deaf Children's Society. Now, I'm going to wear around my neck a little piece of kit which I think makes life a little bit easier. Which is what we aim to do here. It's lovely to have you both. Thank you so much for coming in. Can I start by asking you to please describe how life was made harder for someone like yourself with a hearing impairment?
So I'm a lip reader. First of all, I can't use sign.
Oh, did you?
It makes life a lot harder by not having the lips to rely on for a lot of the guest work that I'm having to do. So with the mask and so on, I'm finding it difficult to buy things in shop, talk to friends, do normal social life and university life as well. And it's just quite exhausting to keep trying to have to test things or to ask people to write things down or anything.
Holly, what Susan is saying there, I think, sums up very neatly the challenge that's faced by people who have who have trouble with hearing. And it occurred to me very early on, for personal reasons actually, that covering people's faces was going to make life even harder. How much of a challenge has that aspect of lockdown been?
Yeah, so it's been a major challenge. So young people have told us that it makes life so much more difficult for them. And everywhere they go, they are encountering people that are wearing face masks. So as was explained, it makes it harder to lip read. It also means that the sound is muffled and you can't read expressions in the same way. So one parent told us recently that their child went to a corner shop just to buy some flour, and the shopkeeper got really cross with them because they were trying to explain where the flour was, but they couldn't understand. So that kind of thing is happening on a regular basis to children and young people, and it makes life much harder than it needs to be. There are so many things that people can do to help.
Just to clarify, I have inexcusably jumbled up your names, haven't I? You are Susan.
That's right.
Susan, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
It was just in all the confusion of you coming in. I was expecting it. Anyway, long story short, what are those things that people could be doing that simply make life easier? Because obviously people still feel the necessity in many instances to keep wearing the masks. What can be done to make life better?
So if I kick off and then I'll pass on to you. So there are lots of things that people can do. Just a bit of deaf awareness makes a huge difference. So speaking more clearly, if people are able to lower their masks so that the deaf young person can lip read them, using gesture, writing things down, even using a phone app where you transcribe speech to text. But the most important thing is to ask the young person or the child what can work for them rather than making assumptions. What do you think?
I thoroughly agree with that, actually, because I'm working as a student paramedic as well, so I have to deal with the masks on a daily basis as well. And it helps just to write things down, it helps to pull down masks as well, obviously where it's safe to do so. And gestures, anything that's of any help at all, it's really helpful.
And Holly, I suppose as well, it comes down to patience and understanding as well, doesn't it? It's so easy for us in our busy lives to overlook challenges that somebody else might be dealing with, but of which we are unaware. So I suppose some of it must be about taking the time and appreciating that, some people are dealing with something else on top of it all.
I think so many people find it hard to understand people who are wearing masks anyway. So the more people can do just to slow down, be a bit patient, think about the strategies that they can use to make themselves understood, it makes a huge difference, and that patience and understanding goes a very long way for deaf children and young people.
And Holly, have you been made aware of more people, young people, but people in general with hearing difficulties? Are more people feeling isolated, and have they been getting in touch to say so?
I definitely think that there's been a lot more isolation because young deaf people, we rely a lot on friendships and so on. We don't always necessarily want to talk with family and so on. So it's difficult in social situations when people are wearing masks. And so it's very sort of off-putting because we're already dealing with challenges such as can we go to a quiet room and so on. And now we've got this added challenge on top as well. And it just makes this whole long list of things that we have to ask a lot longer. And as well as going out as well, it's a lot harder because, as you said, going to the corner shop, people getting angry with you as well. It happens a lot. And it's something you can't change, so it's just very frustrating. It's very sort of isolating and off-putting, and it's exhausting.
Absolutely. It was brought home to me very, very poignantly. I was on the railway platform in my hometown. I was waiting for a train, and a young chap recognised me and came up to me, and he said that he had very recently had a cochlear implant, and he said it had literally, he thought, saved his life, because during the time of lockdown and masks with his hearing impairment, he had felt incredibly isolated. And he actually said, I don't know where I would be now if my appointment hadn't come forward and I hadn't got the cochlear implant. And I was so struck by the fact that I had walked past him on the platform and not given a thought to the fact that somebody else, another life, was challenged and made difficult by something I wasn't thinking about.
I think it just goes back to the point about people needing to be aware, and there's so much that they can do with a little bit of time and patience. So the more people that are deaf aware, the better. And there's some simple things that everyone can do to make everyone's life. We need patience and that tolerance. It makes a huge difference.
Broadly though, are you accepting of the face masks, or would you like to see that restriction, perhaps relaxed for people, in order to make life easier again for the hard of hearing?
So, I mean, public health and public safety has got to be paramount. But I think I hope programmes like this, where we're talking to people about what they can do to support deaf people through deaf awareness, about removing face masks if they feel safe to do so, just writing things down, all those sort of strategies are important, but obviously public safety and public health has to be paramount. What do you think?
Yes, obviously, being a student paramedic as well, it's really, really important because we do come in contact with COVID patients as well. And so there's no way around that really, because it's safe for us and it's safe for them to keep that infection sort of separate. And so I think, yes, obviously writing things down, and I think clear face mask could also be something.
How simple an idea is that?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I used it in university. A lot of my friends used to clear face mask when they were with me as well.
Of course.
It makes a big difference, actually.
And are those readily available?
Pardon?
Are those readily available?
They can be, yeah. They can be difficult to acquire, but once you have them, then you've got them, you can use them.
What a simple solution.
Yeah, the National Deaf Children's Society had a big campaign to try and ensure that there are transparent face masks available to people in the health service, particularly working in areas where there are a lot of deaf patients. And gradually that is starting to spread out, but we do need to see that more.
Thank you so much for bringing this in. I think ultimately, for me, it comes down to patience and understanding. I think it's a timely reminder that we have to pay attention to the idea that some people are dealing with something else we hadn't thought of, and many times it just comes down to being patient and giving another thought. But thank you so much for coming in and turning a light on this for me.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you.
And Holly, thank you very much. After the break, we will be hearing from the man who helped to rescue seal pups in the wake of Storm Arwen.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, the effects of Storm Arwen are still being felt all across the UK, a fortnight since it hit the country. In some areas, the military has been drafted in, and in others, it's the RSPCA. On the Norfolk coast, the wildlife charity carried out seal pup rescue operations after a number of pups were found separated from their mothers during the storm. I'm joined now by Evangelos Achilleos, who's the manager of the RSPCA East Winch Wildlife Centre in Norfolk. Did I get your name pronounced properly there? That was a challenging one.
Yes, you did. The S is silent, so it's Evangelo, but you did really well.
I will remember. Thank you for being with me, Evangelo. Now, can you tell us what will have happened to cause the mothers of these pups to leave them behind? What goes wrong?
It's simply due to the impact of the storm. The storm has caused lots of tides, and the tides in turn have caused the pups to be taken from the coastline into the water, and then the pups would slowly haul out at a completely different point than when they were initially with their mum. There might be several miles that they've been separated, and that would be the main reason why the pups would have been unfortunately separated from their mum as a consequence of the storm.
What age are the pups that you've been rescuing in Norfolk? I suppose what I'm thinking is, if this hadn't happened, how much longer would these particular pups have been expected to stay with their mothers?
So the pups that we have really do vary in age. We'll get some that will only be a few days old, some that are a few weeks old. Under normal circumstances, the pups will be with their mum for 3 weeks. And they're just feeding on the milk, which is highly nutritious. They gain a lot of weight. They become very, very chunky, giving them all the reserves that they need. And then they wean from their mum, approximately 3 weeks of age. And then they go through a molt where they'll change from their white coat to a grey coat. And they then slowly start swimming more often and start hunting for fish themselves.
But really, after just 3 weeks, these little creatures are expected to be and are self-sufficient without any parental care.
Yes, it's a very interesting lifestyle of a seal. They gain independence really quickly, and it is linked to the fact of how nutritious what they actually get from their mum for the first few weeks is. They literally stay with their mum, feeding for the most of the time. The mum might leave them for a short period of time for her to hunt, but predominantly they just stay together for them to develop all the reserves that they need for them to survive once the mum does move on.
So what is happening to these pups now? Are they with foster carers, or are they all at a centre? What's going on?
So all of these pups are at our wildlife centre. So these pups are currently being fed 6 times a day by our wildlife assistants, who are working relentlessly and it's very labour intensive to be feeding all these pups. So last week we only had 6. We've gone up to 15 grey seal pups now that we're rearing. So very labour intensive. It's taking a lot of time for the staff as well, and it's going to take us around 5 months for us to wean the pups from fish soup, which is what they're currently eating, to fish, to then getting them to eat by themselves. Then they start eating in the water. They then start moving into deeper pools. Then they start moving outside, and we eventually release them. So they'll be with us for a long period of time.
I am amazed. I'm always brought up short with the idea that, you know, I'm going about my normal daily life, and somewhere a group of individuals is having to do something like hand rear and live minute by minute with abandoned seal pups. It is heartwarming.
It is, but what we always need to bear in mind, this is a massive community effort. So it's the members of the public who notice that pups have been separated, who notice there's a pup that's unwell. They get in contact either with us or with the amazing Friends of Horsey organisation, the Marine Wildlife Rescue, the British Divers, or our inspectorate. They're the ones that then go and collect the pups and then bring the pups to us. And then from our team, the wildlife assistants, the maintenance team, the receptionists, the vets, our volunteers. It's such a community which comes together for us to be able to rehabilitate all our wildlife. Because other than seals, we currently have over 200 hedgehogs in. So it really is a community effort to keep all the wildlife that we have, rescue, rehabilitate. So we're so extremely grateful to all the organisations and the members of the public and the amazing team we have at Eastwinch to help us keep going and keep rescuing and rehabilitating as many animals as we can.
Evangelo, you're an absolute inspiration. If the seal pups can survive just on energy and enthusiasm, they'll have more than enough just from being in the presence of someone as dynamic as yourself. Thank you so much for being with us and telling all about that sensitive rescue. Now, Storm Arwen was 2 weeks ago, yes, and what was the last one we had? Storm Barra has blown through as well. That chaos that ensued, and people are still without power on account of Storm Arwen in places like County Durham and in Cumbria and obviously in Northumberland. Would that have happened to communities who were in the southeast, inside the M25?
I don't think it would have happened without it being declared a national emergency. The thing that's really shocking for me is every time we talk about this is a crisis, this is an emergency, at the moment it's always COVID related. But actually this was a genuine political crisis and it's barely got a look in terms of Parliament, right? You just heard what it takes to rescue seal pups. Actually, it would take a great deal more than that to rescue people. But actually, when we hear these stay-at-home orders coming out, you know, people sort of say, well, what's the harm in working from home? Well, I'll tell you what the harm is. You can't do things like look after people, look after seal pups, whatever it is. And one of the things that's really worried me is that I've talked to people who apparently, in terms of getting the electricity going, a lot of people were off sick with pingdemics. Other people had been working from home. A lot of our infrastructure has collapsed during this period. Now, I'm saying that really because I always think with anything to do with COVID, there's got to be a balance of risks. You've always got to go, what's the collateral damage? These things are not free of consequence. So I just want those people who say, there's nothing wrong with these restrictions. Fair enough, but can you remember what you lose? And if everybody works from home, you won't be saving any seal pumps, you won't be getting the electric working. Imagine, in this cold, elderly people in care homes had no electric for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but you can't put this all on COVID. This is a north-south story. This is a story about the north. It could have been the south. It was Cornwall a few years ago. Do you remember? No one in London gave a toss about it. None of our politicians cared about it. And it's the same with this. It's in the north. It's in Scotland. It's in the borders. It's in Cumbria and places like that. It's been absolutely shocking. And there's no reason why people shouldn't have their heating back on. We went into another storm and people were still living there without any heat. I saw a story about a guy, he was collecting wood. All he had was a wood burner and to heat his whole house. It's absolutely shocking. And you're right, Neil, if that had been in the home counties, which it wouldn't be, obviously, because of the geography, or in London, it would have been dealt with.
I read coverage of a 90-year-old man living alone in a house, a little house in Northumberland. He was having to stay in his bed because of the cold.
Yeah.
He had a neighbour's electric generator with a cable coming in through his open bedroom window to let the cable in, and he was being taken care of. He was being kept alive by the kindness of friends and neighbours.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you believe that a 90-year-old was in those circumstances in 21st century?
No, I can't. I mean, I can't. But the other side of it, I can't really either, because they were putting people in hotels that really were being severely compromised. I mean, there were some people that were just saying, right, well, we can, we're okay, we've got the wood stove. They were ruining the fact that they've lost everything in their freezer or whatever, but they were sort of like, oh, we'll carry on and whatever. But others were put into local hotels, so I don't quite know why he was like that. I suspect he was quite stoic and going sort of, I'm not moving.
I just don't think there was a coordinated plan.
There wasn't a coordinated plan.
And, you know, we always go,
the help was there if they wanted, because it's local councils. You know, we can't put this on a kind of a national scale.
I'm interested by what you were saying there, that angle that you opened up there. That is COVID now being a kind of a cover-all and an excuse for things that have been going awry and that have been falling by the wayside?
I don't think it's I actually don't think it's an excuse. I'm actually saying there's a consequence. I mean, we saw the consequences for the Afghan withdrawal, that the Foreign Office crowd were at home, like working from home, and they basically weren't dealing with emails sufficiently. There was no sort of collective effort.
I was on holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying generally there's a cost to pay. But I also think, you know, it's been discussed on this programme, but when people talk about we can have heat pump generators instead of modern electrics. When you think about the cost of net zero, when people talk about, oh, well, you know, we've got to stop using energy. This is what it's like when you haven't got access to energy. You freeze, right? And for all those people who think that's a worthy aim. So what drives me mad about the government is the crisis on COVID. Okay.
I'll have to come in. That's all from me tonight on Neil Oliver Live. Thanks to all of my guests, Claire and Ingrid and John as usual. I'll be back from 7 o'clock next Saturday with a very special Christmas guest. But now it's time for Mark Dolan Tonight.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy for many, but it will be on the mild side. Let's now take a look at the details. Southwest England will start rather dull and cloudy, however a few sunny breaks will begin to develop. It'll be a very mild start with temperatures in double figures. Moving further east, and there'll be some rain around first thing, but it will become drier as the morning progresses. Wales and the Midlands will also get off to a cloudy and damp start with some hill fog in places, but skies will brighten in a few spots. Northwest England will see a band of wet weather move northwards during the morning, with the heaviest rain likely across the Pennines. Further east, and we may see some brightness first thing, but the cloud and rain further south will spread in throughout the morning. The rain will be very patchy, especially towards the east coast. It'll be a fairly chilly start with perhaps a patchy frost across Scotland, but we will see a mix of sunshine and showers, although southern areas will turn increasingly cloudy. Northern Ireland will also start off fairly bright and chilly, but cloud and rain will spread north throughout the morning, with winds also beginning to increase here. Towards lunchtime, southern areas will see brighter spells develop, but remaining damp elsewhere.